Hello and welcome to another pattern recognition video featuring some more simplification patterns. I've been doing quite a few of these because it seems like viewers and subscribers have been watching these more, and these can definitely help you. You want to solve puzzles regularly if you're trying to improve your chess quickly. So here we're going to try and do, as always, 10 puzzles. Pause at any time if you need to think longer. It looks like a rook has just moved here to d6, attacking our queen. It's protected by the pawn. And also, before you solve a puzzle, look at the material count. We have 5 pawns versus 5, and everything else is equal. So what can we do here? Look for checks, captures, and threats in that order. Checks first, as they're the most forcing. Do we have any checks? Maybe our queen could capture the pawn or move here, but in each instance, there's a possibility of being captured. All right, now the obvious move would be maybe to take. Does that work? If we take that rook, what would happen then? We have to look for checks, captures, and threats against our own king as well. So the queen is covering this diagonal. Could deliver some checks, but we could just capture. The knight, that looks a little more dangerous. The knight could jump in here, forking the king and the queen and the rook, but our knight is guarding that square, so I think we would be okay. So if you're trying to simplify down into a winning endgame, you want to go ahead in material, of course. And you want to start by trading material. It looks like we can just take that rook. Now, if the knight captures, we capture up here. Queen captures, we pick off a pawn maybe. I'm thinking that's the way to go, is to just grab this. Let's try that. Yes, that's what they want. And now we have 2 attackers on this knight as well. So we could go ahead and maybe pick that off. Do we have to worry about this check here? Probably not. So might as well grab more material. All right, so after all the trades and the dust is settled, it looks like we're just ahead by this extra knight, and the pawns are even, but we do have to keep an eye on this passed pawn that's trying to run forward and promote here. I don't know. Now that I look at that passed pawn, it does look pretty dangerous. If that pawn pushes forward next, what do we have? We could move this knight up here with a possible threat of mate in 1. The queen could guard against that and protect the passed pawn. Anyway, you can calculate that out on your own if you'd like, but let's move on to the next problem. That way I can solve, or we can solve 10 of them here. All right, rook is just captured. We want to simplify down, so we're looking to trade material possibly, well, most likely. 5 pawns versus 6 by our opponent. What about the rest of the material? 2 minor pieces. The rest of the material looks even overall. We could just capture this rook Perhaps that would be best. Are there any checks? We don't really have any checks against our opponent. Captures, we could just take that. Queen would probably recapture. But then we're ahead a little bit in material. There would be this threat of the queen capturing here maybe. So perhaps we would need to block that next with a rook. I think we're good though. So that's what I'm going to go with. Pause the video if you want to look at it more in depth. All right, now we have to prevent this attack. So I'm thinking if we just bring the rook up here and attack the queen. No, they don't like that. All right, well, let's see. What did we miss here? Do we just take the knight, try and trade down more material? Oh, yes. Okay, I just overlooked that. That's even better. So that's a great example of if you see a good move, pause and look for a better one, because now we can just pick off that rook with check. So now we're up even more material. All right, on to the next problem. Bishop is just captured here, attacking our bishop, and a discovered attack on our queen as well. All right, I don't think we have to worry about that attack on our queen right away, or the bishop, because, okay, first, count up the material. 5 pawns for white, 6 for black. So we're behind in pawns, and they have the bishop pair. So we're just down a pawn. So we need to simplify down into a winning game where we have more material. So we have to win something. Let's look at checks, captures, and threats in that order. Check. We could capture the rook. Queen would capture. Our rook would capture. Their rook captures. And then we can pick off that unprotected bishop. So this is important. Whenever you're looking at tactics, look for any unprotected pieces. And that's kind of like a guidepost or a billboard saying, hey, there might be some tactics available here when there's an unprotected piece like this bishop. So let's go here. Capture, capture, and we grab that bishop. So now we're just up by a knight. All right, on to the next problem. What do we have here? Knight just dropped back and it's attacking our queen, but our queen is attacking their queen. So, all right, a little bit going on here. You might have to do a little more calculation. And I mentioned this in the past. If you're doing pattern recognition problems, they should probably be easier and more simple, where it's less calculation and more about solving a bunch of problems and just seeing those patterns over and over again. Now, as you improve, you're going to want to do harder problems where you have to calculate a little bit more. All right, so what do we do here? We're trying to simplify down. The material count is 6 pawns for us, 5 for our opponent. So we're ahead by a pawn. So we should probably just start trading down material. The queen's under attack, so we have to do something about that. So maybe we just take their queen. The rook captures. Well, now they'll have an unprotected rook, so we could move our knight and have with a check either here or here. Probably here, because if we go to f6, or excuse me, f3, the rook can move and capture. So see if you can calculate that out on your own. Pause if you need more time. If not, here we go. We're going to capture, and then we're going to move the knight, not here where the rook can take it, but up here with check, allowing us to pick off that rook. And so, we're ahead now. A rook for the knight. Now our opponent could try and pick this pawn off. And another good piece of advice I read it in a book. It was basically when you're doing a tactic, especially, if you're in a tournament and it's a serious game and you're thinking about starting a combination, some tactical combination, and you think it's good, try and calculate one or two moves further, because that might unveil something that you overlooked, So a helpful piece of advice. All right, on to the next problem. Knight has jumped forward here with check. And it looks like our pawn can capture. But then queen would capture here with check. All right, so let's take a look at this. Material count, 5 pawns versus 6 for our opponent. So we're down by a pawn. The rest of the material is even. Oh, wait, I need to learn to count. Hold on. I had a good point that was brought up by one of the viewers. I need to learn how to count these pawns. So 7 pawns here. We only have 5, so we're down by 2 pawns. I have to work on my counting. I apologize for that. All right, what do we have next here? This is why we're practicing the basics. All right. So we're down in material. Whatever we do to simplify, we have to make sure we gain that material back. Okay. Now, if we go with our normal routine, we want to look at checks, captures, and threats. Do we have any good checks? I don't see any. The queen could capture here, but it would just be captured by the pawn. That would deliver a check. But that doesn't work. Any other checks? I don't see any other possible checks. So now we're looking at captures. You want to look at unprotected pieces. Are there any pieces or pawns that are not protected? Well, this pawn here, but we can't get to that in one move anyway. All right, so everything else is protected except for these rooks. We have rooks on the corner. Black's rooks are not protected. All right. Now, something else you want to look at is a piece that appears to be protected, but it might be an illusion. So see if you can find a piece on the board that looks like it's protected, but it's really not, because the piece that's defending it is pinned to a more valuable piece. So this knight here appears to be protected by that pawn. But we could go ahead and capture that with our queen, because if the pawn captures, our rook will be able to recapture. So hopefully you got that one. Capture and recapture. And so we go up by the knight there. We get the knight in that trade. Okay, 5 more to go. Let's see if we can work through these and make sure the video is not too crazy long. All right, what do we have here? A rook is moved forward, attacking our bishop, which is unprotected at the moment. So, as I mentioned before, we're looking for checks, captures, and threats. And when it comes to captures, if something's unprotected, we may be able to threaten it and then, or possibly capture it immediately. So we're under attack. We need to look at checks first. The bishop could move and capture the pawn with check. But do we have a decent follow-up after that? So you definitely have to look at that. Okay, there's a little bit more going on here, so we definitely need to do a little bit of calculation. If we bring or capture that pawn, looks like the knight could maybe just recapture the bishop, or capture this bishop if it takes the pawn. The king could maybe as well, but I don't think that works so well. We could maybe check this way with the bishop. But remember, when a king is being attacked by checks, he has 3 or less options. Capture the attacker, which could be done here. The rook could capture, but then our knight would recapture. Block, that could be done with a retreat of the bishop, or run. The king could simply run. All right, so that's a possibility, but let's look at captures as well. We do have a possibility of maybe capturing the bishop. At the same time, that would allow our rook to protect our bishop here. So if we take their bishop, their knight will probably go ahead and recapture. And then what? What do we have after that? If anything. So let's look at it. Knight captures, knight captures. Oh, okay. Then see if you can figure it out. If you need a hint, it could involve a bishop move here. So maybe after knight takes, pause the video if you need more time. Bishop takes the pawn, and if the king captures, well, then our other rook moves over or up and grabs their rook. So here we go. Capture. Capture with check. And then the rook takes. All right, on to the next puzzle. We have 4 more to go. See if we can knock these out. Queen is attacking queen here. The piece count. Let me practice my counting skills here. So 6 pawns for our opponent, 3 for us. So we're down by 3 pawns, but we have an extra knight. So material is about even there. But our pieces are hovering around the opponent here. And we want to trade down and come out ahead in the end. So, checks first. A very forcing move might be to take their queen with our queen, delivering a check as well. So, remember, whenever you capture and check the king here, he has 3 or less options. He can't block when the queen is right beside the king, so he either has to capture or run. And I don't think he can even run here. He cannot because of all our pieces around him. So it's either a king capture, but then that'll leave his rook unprotected. So he'll probably capture with the pawn. And then, oh, we could just go here and pick off his rook. And then we'll have an extra knight, but then the material is even once again. So maybe we have something better here. All right. Oh, okay. We have to look at all our possible checks. Well, all right, this one's turned out to be a little trickier than I anticipated. I was thinking, what about this check? If we go here and check the king, he would be forced to capture. But his queen is still protected here. So maybe we need to maybe try and move our queen here with check, but then the king could just capture. If he does, we would grab his rook with check. Maybe that works. We could go over here with check. If the rook blocked, well then, what do we do? We could attack with the rook. If the king moves, then our rook picks off the... Wow, okay, this is turning into a more calculation-driven tactic problem here. So if we check here, and the rook blocks, oh, well then our knight can just capture. That would probably work. So the other option, we check there, the king takes this, but then we grab the rook up here. So maybe that's the better move. I'm going to go with that. Okay, that's what they want, because if the rook tries to block, our knight just takes the rook. If the king captures our knight, well then we just pick off the rook with check. Okay, 3 more to go. Hopefully you're doing well on these problems. Okay, piece count, 5 pawns versus 5. Knight versus bishop. The rest is equal. Our queen is under attack, so we have to deal with that. Do we have any checks? The only check I see is capturing the rook, but then the other rook could just recapture. And what have we accomplished? Not much there. Okay. Well, okay, so we're looking at checks, captures, and threats. Capturing that rook doesn't look so good, I don't think, because they'll just recapture. Unprotected pieces, well, because our queen is under attack, we don't really have time to pick this off. Oh, okay. Maybe we do have time. Take a look at this. Pause if you need more time. We're trying to simplify down, so that usually involves exchanging materials. So perhaps we just let our queen remain under attack by that rook because we can counterattack. We grab their bishop, but at the same time, we're attacking their queen. But does that work? So if we go there and they capture, well, then we just capture their knight. So it looks like it works to me. Although that was a surprising move. So now, and this is all the more reason to practice these puzzles. You never know. And work on your calculation as well. But you have to look out for these unexpected moves. So now, if we just take that, we're going to be behind in material. So first, we have to take the rook with check and then go after that queen. So now we're up by a knight. Okay, the final two problems. Our queen is under attack by this pawn. What can we do about that? Material count is 5 pawns versus 5. Everything else is about equal, but our queen is under attack. We need to figure out how to respond to that. Okay, checks, captures, and threats. The only check I see is, well, moving the queen here and delivering a check, but that looks pretty terrible as there are multiple pieces covering that. You know, maybe we capture and sacrifice. That could be something to consider. All right, quite a bit going on here. We are attacking their queen, so if we're trying to simplify, maybe we trade down. But how do we gain some edge while we're doing that? What if we capture, forcing the king to recapture? But I don't know if that works. Maybe we capture immediately. Capture the queen. If they take our queen, well, then we have time to take the knight because our bishop is backing us up. So I think that works. Let's check everything. So if we capture, they capture our queen, then we can just pick off the knight, backed up by our bishop. All right. And after that, we end up a bishop ahead in the endgame. All right, the final problem. Here we go. Knight has jumped forward, blocking us from possibly exchanging here. But what should we do? Okay, count up the material. 6 pawns is what we have. They only have 5. What now? They do have an extra knight, though. So whatever we do, we need to gain some material here. Or, well, yes, we definitely need to gain some material. All right, what if, do we have any checks? This, but the king can just capture. That doesn't look so good. We could check again with a bishop, but the king can just run. All right, no good checks. What about captures? Any unprotected pieces? No, everything's protected by our opponent. But, if we look at everything, what if we go there? If the queen captures, our bishop could capture. And if the rook captures our bishop, well, then we can pick this off. So I think that works. All right, well, hopefully you were able to solve that one. We end up ahead here in the end game with an extra pawn on the queen side. So that's very important in the end game. 3 versus 2. You can try and push your unopposed pawn up the board and get a passed pawn that you can try and promote over here. And we also have 2 rooks versus rook and knight. So that should be a pretty good advantage in the end. All right, feel free to leave comments. As I say, I always enjoy hearing from viewers and subscribers, both positive and negative comments that I can learn from. Whatever you have to say. All right, like and subscribe to support the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching and have a super chess day.